I'll go ahead and get this meeting started. I would like to welcome everyone to the second meeting of the interim committee, subcommittee on budget review subcommittee, justice and judiciary. Would like to advise all of those here and joining us remotely that all the materials that were received by the deadline are posted online and are available for you to download. And I would also remind members that as you answer roll call, please indicate whether you're present in person, remote from your district, or remote from your annex office. And at this time, please ask the secretary to call the roll.
Senator Schickel.
Present in district.
Thank you. Senator Webb. Senator Westerfield. Representative Cantrell. Representative Decker.
Present in the room.
Representative Elliott.
Present for my district.
Thank you, sir. Representative Hatton.
Here in the room.
Representative Nemus.
Present in Louisville.
Thank you, sir. Senator McDaniel. Representative Petrie. Representative Reed. Representative Massey. Co-Chair Fisher.
Present in the room.
Chair Carroll.
Present in the room. Okay, I'm going to begin. I'm really kind of at a loss for words this morning and still trying to pull things together with the loss of our colleague, Senator Tom Buford. I'm sure all of you all heard the news yesterday, and I complete shock to all of us. And so if you all don't mind, I think we're going to begin this morning. And I don't know how fitting it is to have a moment of silence because Tom was rarely silent at any point. He always had input in everything that we did. And Tom always had a unique perspective in any issue that we were dealing with. And his institutional knowledge and experience over the years were just invaluable. And I can't tell you the number of times that we would be in a meeting in caucus, and he always knew the peripheral issues, and he always knew where attacks might come from on whatever issue it might be, and it just came from the wealth of knowledge and experience that he had over the years. And of any senator that we have within our caucus, I never knew how Tom Buford was going to vote on anything. I just never could figure the man out. You would think that he would be going one way and then he'd vote totally different. So, but very successful. I think talking with him last time when he ran for re-election, I don't know that he had to put up much of a campaign. I think he was just that well thought of in his area, and just a tremendous asset to our caucus, to this Commonwealth, and a great loss to our caucus and a great loss to our Commonwealth. And my prayers, and I know all of my colleagues here in the House and Senate, all of us here in Frankfort, our prayers are with his family at this time of loss. And it's just it's a shock. I mean, yesterday I just stopped in my tracks, and I couldn't get the email to open to read that this can't be right. And I told my wife, I said, Teresa, Tom Buford passed away. And today I still don't have a lot more information on what happened, but my heart breaks for his family. So I would ask today if we would please stand in a moment of silence to remember Senator Buford. Thank you. Okay, a little while back, I had the opportunity to speak with Commissioner Nick Jellick with the DOCJT and talking about the state of the firearms range at DLCJT, and having gone through the academy many years ago, I have an intimate knowledge with how important the firearms training is, and having quality facility to make sure that happens. And and I remember when I started firearms training, we had the old 38 revolvers, and I could not hit the broadside of a barn with that revolver. And but the training was top rate, and by the end of the academy, I was much better, and appreciate the personnel there. And as a police officer, that is the most important tool you have to ensure that you go home at night. And I think it's one of the most critical aspects of the training that we have. And in talking with the commissioner, learned of the state of facility that we have and the disrepair that it's in, and he told me about the plans to replace it and what's needed, and assured him that we would get him in a committee meeting so he could present his case, and hopefully it's something we can address this session. But before we begin with that, we do need to approve the minutes from the June 2nd, 2021 meeting, and I would entertain a motion. Have a motion, a second. Have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. Minutes are approved. Commissioner Gillick, if you would, sir, please introduce yourself for the record and have your guests to also introduce themselves, and you have the floor.
Excuse me, sorry. Learn the new to me technology here. My name is Nikolai Jellick. I'm currently the commissioner of the Department of Criminal Justice Training.
My name is Frank Kabala. I'm the training director for the Department of Criminal Justice Training.
My name is Kevin Rader. I'm the assistant director of the administrative division at Department of Criminal Justice Training.
Joe Wallace, supervisor, firearms section, DOCJT.
I'd like to begin by thanking you, Senator Carroll, for giving us the opportunity to speak on this. And I wanted to thank, obviously, the committee for their time this morning. So we're here to discuss and to talk about our firing range, the Mckinney Range, a range that is structurally failing, a range that no longer is meeting our training needs. But before I get into that, I'd like to take a minute just for the edification of the committee to fully kind of understand the scope of this and the significance to the Commonwealth. So currently there are 5 approved academies for the state of Kentucky. 4 of those 5, they service only one agency each. There's Bowling Green, Lexington, Louisville, and KSP. The remaining 430 plus law enforcement agencies from across the state, they all rely on DOCJT for their mandated basic in-service basic training, which is the training required to be certified to be a police officer in Kentucky, as well as the in-service training, which is mandated minimum of 40 hours a year to maintain that certification. So it's a pretty big responsibility. Almost all of the constituents that you all represent have law enforcement that relies on DOCJT for their training. With that said, the range, the Mckinney Range, was built in 1992 as part of the Funderburk project, which was the first, I would argue, one of the first big advancements for DOCJT. There was some construction of some buildings that allowed for some office space and some training space, the Mckinney Range being part of that. The Mckinney Range, in conjunction with our Boonesboro Range, which is an outdoor-only range on the Kentucky River about 16 miles north of Richmond, those are the 2 facilities that we currently have for use to be able to deliver firearms-related training. The McKinney Range, built again in '92, is primarily a concrete box that is partially covered. I say partially covered. It has a louvered roof, kind of a unique shape to the roof that directs all of the sound out backwards. I'm sure at the time that the McKinney Range was built, having only 16 lanes and the type of construction was the best that they were able to do, and at the time, I'm sure, met the needs that DOCJT had in 1992. Throughout the course of this testimony this morning, Supervisor Wallace will address some of the statistics and numbers of just how the demand for our training has increased over the years. But what was sufficient in 92, I would argue, when I went through in 2002, was already starting to show its age, that it was difficult for us to run our classes through. The class that I was a part of was much larger than 16, which required a minimum of 2 relays to go through. That starts to double the training time, and as well as the condition of the building. I remember commenting on it back in 2002 that the condition was already suffering. So that leads me up to 2020 when I became commissioner. And part of my process of becoming commissioner is getting familiar with the current state of all the facilities and everything that we have going on. And right away, the staff brought to my attention just how critical the condition of the range was. And we'll briefly get into that. I'm going to have the Assistant Admin Director Rader be able to speak a little bit more on that here in a moment. But it was literally so bad that when I went to touch the wall where the paint looked like it was peeling and concrete would crumble at my fingertips. So over the course of that summer leading into fall, we had an architectural firm do a structural analysis, and the result of that report was pretty stark. And again, I'm going to leave that up to Mr. Rader to speak to. We have a video to show that we'll show at some point, and that will kind of give you not only what you have been provided in photographs, which we've also, I know you've been given electronic copies, but we've provided you with some paper copies to flip through. But you'll be able to see with a video exactly just how bad the condition is. But Mr. Rader.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Senator, and members of the committee for giving us an opportunity to come today and present the condition of the firing range and hear basically the state that it's in. As the Commissioner alluded to, so a little bit of background, the firing range, for some time, we've band-aided it and done repairs over the years, but it's quickly got to the point that those band-aids aren't working anymore. And in 2017, the end of 2017 into 2018, we began kind of a campus-wide assessment of our buildings. For many years prior to that, we worked jointly with Eastern Kentucky University to help maintain our facilities, and now are solely responsible for those. We wanted to get basically a report on each one of the facilities. And as the Commissioner alluded to, the report on the firing range was quite startling. The first assessment that we did on the firing range was in March of 2019, and this is on page 5, and kind of some of these quotes come from the assessment report, which I brought the assessment report just to kind of, for you guys to see how thick it was and how much time and effort that the architectural firm put into it and the structural engineers. But in 2019, this is in March of 2019, the EOP report states that, and EOP is the architectural firm that we're working with out of Lexington, stated that it's our opinion that the building is beyond its useful life in regards to its current condition and other limitations in performance and meeting program requirements. So since that time, we started doing a few things to the range that would kind of help it along and get it to the point. One of the first things that we did is the non-slip flooring that we had started crumbling because of moisture and things underneath the concrete flooring, and we resurfaced that about a year ago. The 1 year walkthrough was just yesterday, and we've actually witnessed and seen some cracking since then, which tells us that the floor is still shifting. Spoke about 30 minutes yesterday with EOP, the architectural firm, to kind of get an update on that. We added some soundproofing materials to the walls there too, and it covers up a lot of the deterioration underneath it, but it was necessary because of the sound reverberation and the things of that nature for the instructors to do that. Fast forward to September, of 2020. And this is when the most, I guess, stifling news came to our attention. We had a structural firm come in and reassess from March of 2019, so a little over a year and a half later. They came in and did their assessment, and on page 11, the statement, read the report, and this really opened our eyes to how bad the range was. And I'm gonna read here from the report, and it's on page 11. It says, at the joint where the deterioration is most severe, the wall supports a steel roof truss. There is potential for the wall to fail, leading to a catastrophic partial collapse of the adjacent roof structure. So we immediately reached out to EOP and the structural engineers to find out, what do we need to do to be able to continue to use the range and make it safe. And they recommended a temporary support beam, if you will, that sits on the wall that supports the roof truss. And that's where the wall there on page 11 in that picture, basically the red segment, they're recommending that wall just be tore down and rebuilt. And really much can be said about the rest of the facilities you'll see here in a minute in the video. But in order to immediately address the issue, we put in that temporary truss. We had to also shore up the garage door that you can see in there, so that the building could remain safe and we could continue to use it. And one last thing before I turn it over to Mr. Wallace that I want to point out, you'll look on page 10 at the very top. You'll see some concrete there that's kind of protruding out. Well, that's where the block has eroded, okay? And that basically the concrete was put in there to help support. That's where one of the main roof trusses sit. And you can see from that picture that what's happening to basically each one of those roof supports is the amount of weight that's from the roof and causing that type of stress. And you can see where that's starting to fail, some of those beam pockets. But with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Wallace. He has a presentation and video on the firing range.
So I kind of narrate this video as we go through. This was shot to kind of get video for this project that we're working on. This is an overview of the baffled roof that the commissioner was talking about. And when it was built, this was designed off FLETC's range, Federal Law Enforcement Training Center. There's a lot of them across the country. And at the time, that was about the best design you could get. But those baffles point directly toward the hospital, which sits about a quarter of a mile from this, and it's an immense amount of sand. This is where those supports that Mr. Rader was talking about, all that weight from that roof is literally just crumbling the block underneath it, which they've tried to patch with concrete, but it's just kind of a Band-Aid, like he said, it's not adhering anymore. You can see where the building's literally separating. The blocks, you can see daylight through it. You can put your hand in it. When you touch it, like the commissioner says, it just crumbles. It's not really structurally sound at all. But that sound goes toward our neighbors, which used to be more distance. Now, as the campus grows, as our agency grows, as the community grows, even the sound is becoming an issue for the community. This is the flooring that Mr. Rader was talking about that we installed. You can see that black sound absorbing material. That helped reduce a little bit of the noise, but with it being an open baffled roof, most of it goes out into the community. The door was in such bad shape that we had to shore it up with I-beams and pretty much discontinue its use, which affected our training ability as well, because we no longer can open that door to get cruisers into the range to do the training that we need. Again, you can see cracks in that wall, extensive molding from the moisture. The building is essentially crumbling is what it's doing. But without the door, we'll get into that in a minute. We just don't use this for a firing range. We have to use it for a lot of different aspects of training at the academy. And without having access to that bay door, that pretty much eliminated the use of that facility for those other areas. Even the roof itself in the enclosed portion, this is behind the range, kind of in the staging area where the restrooms and cleaning room is leaking as well. They've tried to fix it, but where the building's actually separating, every time they seal it, it'll shift more and just break the seal, and it's just a constant battle of having to try to keep moisture and water out of the facility. I believe it was 3 weeks ago when we had the real bad rain. There was water pouring through into the inside, not the range portion, but the staging area portion, to the point to where it was pouring in through the electronics that run the targeting system and the intercom system, which then creates even a bigger safety issue because we have water pouring onto electrical components, which is a huge issue. But this gives you an idea of what those metal trusses that he was referring to, those span the whole range, but where they sit on that block, there's no more support for them anymore. There's nothing there to hold all that weight up in the air.
If I could have a few comments. So it's basically a concrete box that has these large steel beams that rest across the roof, and from those beams rest the wooden louvers. The report, you'll read in the report, the joints between the blocks, they are all failing, all of the joints. Concrete, and Senator McDaniel, I can't recall if he was able to make this meeting or not, but I've been wanting to get some input from him. I know he's a concrete person by trade, but concrete and water does not mix. And this building has the concrete, which is structural for the building, is exposed to water, both the backside where the berm, where the direction you shoot is underground, so it's getting water directly onto that block. It's coming up from the bottom, and it's also pouring in from the top. So it is a losing battle to try to combat that with, again, all these Band-Aids of trying to patch up the joints, which then separate, put new paint, which then peels. There's constant water pouring in every time there's a weather event with wind blowing in. That water and snow and everything else comes in through the open louvers, which can create ice hazards during the wintertime. It's just a constant battle. We spend a lot of time and resources just to keep it functioning enough to be able to deliver the training. So time and money both are going in just to keep it baseline functioning.
So obviously you can see the damage from the pictures and the video that you have in front of you, but other than that, the biggest concern is it's too small. Like the commissioner spoke to, it's not big enough to meet our training needs now, much less in the future. 16 lanes, our basic classes are 32. So right now we're at the max of running 2 relays is what we split the class in half. We'll shoot half the class is waiting, and then we'll flip-flop and shoot the other half of the class. Well, when we do that, that's twice as much time to do the same amount of training, where when this range was built, their training time was double because they didn't have to do that because the class sizes were smaller. But we're to the point now where we're going to have to increase the class sizes even more, which now is going to push us into shooting 3 relays at a time, which again is going to diminish the amount of hours those recruits get in training. They're on the range the same amount of time, but they're only getting to shoot a third of that time, if you follow what I'm saying. So that's a huge concern as well. The other big thing that hurts us is that range is not rifle rated. We have the Boonesboro range, as the commissioner said, but we just went through extensive flooding on that as well as other issues that we're constantly battling with it. So adding the capability to doing rifle training on campus would, again, increase the amount of training time that we could get on both handgun and patrol rifle training for them. The biggest concern, other than its deteriorating condition, is this range is not ballistically contained. And when I say that, it's got concrete walls all the way around it and on the floor, but the roof is just plywood structure, as you can see from the photographs and the video. That does not keep a round from being able to escape. There's not any escape as long as I've been involved in the firearm program, but you can look at the ceiling and tell in the past it's been struck, which creates, like I said, as our campus grows, EKU grows, and the community around us, that increases a huge liability issue if a round was to escape through the roof of that range. So that's another issue too, as well as the noise that pollution that I pointed out earlier to our neighbors. We have to shoot low light because 80% of our confrontations as law enforcement happens in low light conditions. In the summertime, in June and July, we can't start shooting till after 9:30. So you can imagine how late we shoot. We have some pretty unhappy neighbors during the summertime because we have to start so late. But low light is a huge part. If we had a true indoor range, we could shoot low light conditions at noon. It wouldn't limit us in our ability to offer that training, but we could do it in normal business hours where it wouldn't affect the community around us. Also, with that type of range, you're not going to get the sound pollution from it that you would with this Baffled range that we're operating off of now as well. Also, logistically, it would save the state and our agency money because of travel time and meals, because when we do have to go to Boonesboro facility, like the commissioner mentioned, it's 16 miles from campus. We have to then order food to cater to them because we don't have time to let them go back and eat on campus and come back. So it's not only going to increase training time, but it's also going to reduce cost in other areas as well. But the biggest thing is it's going to increase the training time that those recruits get. Now, I mentioned those bay doors, it affecting other things than firearms. I look at this as a multifunctional facility because before that door was shut, we would pull cruisers in there and do stops training, which teaches them how to do traffic stops. We would do approaches, ambushes, counter ambushes, all kind of patrol tactics as well. So that's a huge chunk of the curriculum in our academy, not just firearms. Well, losing that bay door, we lost that ability. And if we had that fully contained range, again, when they do low light stops, we're not out making noise on the driving track at night. We're inside to where it's more contained as well.
So you hopefully we've painted a fairly clear picture about how we got here and what we have currently. What we're hoping to do is to take this opportunity to not only replace something that is structurally failing that no longer meets our current training needs, but to be able to use this opportunity to fix those, but to also position us for the next 30 years. Law enforcement training has always been important, but if there's ever been a time that the focus has really been on training and the responsibility on the Commonwealth to provide the best training, this is really our opportunity to invest in the future of Kentucky's law enforcement training. The new facility that we are proposing and talking about would be just that. It wouldn't be a range. We've been talking about a range. And if you, in your imaginations, I'm sure and what you've seen on the video is just an open area where people stand static and shoot in one direction towards a paper target. We're hoping to be able to have a training facility, a firearms training facility that will allow for us to advance our training, where we can do firearms training there, but we can incorporate and make it much more comprehensive, which I'll let Dr. Cabala speak about here in a moment. But if you want to briefly discuss the elements of the new proposed facility that we're looking for.
Yes, sir. What we're trying to do is, it is essentially a big open range, but it's not only used for firearms training. The range we have now has columns in it. We need a big open area the days of standing still shooting is not preparing these officers for what they face in the field. They need to be able to learn how to be dynamic and adapt to that situation. So having just an open range, one, is part of it. Two, getting those vehicles to be able to come onto the range where now we can incorporate the stops training, de-escalation, ambush, counter ambush, all that type of training into it is huge. But we also want to build an annex off the side of the range to where when we pull the cruisers in, the officers would be responding to a call to those little annexes. And we call them shoot houses, but they wouldn't be live fire shoot houses or simunition, non-lethal training weapon rooms, to where they could realistically approach a scene like they would in real life and deal with it We don't have that capability now. So that would be huge. Like I said, we're talking about a lot bigger chunk of our training curriculum other than just shooting guns. It carries over to a lot of different areas. Having that capability of them pulling up and getting out of the car and going into a structure and potentially getting into a conflict, or having to come out and get in a car, opens up a whole nother area of training that we're unable to provide them at this time.
Good morning. Thank you for this opportunity to speak to you. I'm going to hit two factors. One, I hate to say I'm the elder statesman at the table here, but I am. I'm in my 24th year at the Department of Criminal Justice Training, starting back in June of 1998, pre-POPs standards. So I have seen Department of Criminal Justice Training grow from 10 weeks to 16 weeks to 18 weeks to our current 20 weeks. I've also seen our pendulum swing from the old, under the 10 weeks, it was block training. Much of education and much of what we learn research-wise, that's not an effective way to teach anything. So we've grown to adult learning, and I would suggest that we have gone to a more of an integrated style of training where everything has a purpose and everything has a place. And it's simply just called our basic training is designed on a crawl, walk, run methodology. What they're learning continues to grow upon itself as it goes. As we discuss this, a shutdown, what a shutdown of our current range would do to us. We learned a little bit here with COVID as we were shut down for almost 3 months. I cannot thank the selfless employees that we have at the Department of Criminal Justice Training. If you would have asked me back in January if we'd have been up to running 5 basic classes here in July and full-blown training and in-service training, I would say I have no idea. In fact, I would have doubted that we would have been able to do that. But our staff has responded to this, and I just want to commend them in front of you all, the fantastic job that they've done in keeping us running and keeping your constituents, the police, in the proper training that they've had. But having said that, as we are just entered into 5 classes running at one single time, if a chief or sheriff calls to put somebody in basic training right now, it is November till I can get him through. That is what this shutdown has done to us. I still have some compliance issues with the CDC and COVID that doesn't allow me to put 2 people in a room at the dorms right now. So we've had to struggle to think about out of the box on how we can get this 5th class up and running. And I suggest to you that 5th class is actually over capacity. I'm going to show a lot of comp time, and that's up to Mr. Wallace and them to adjust and to work through with our staff. But it comes at a price. It comes at a price to their family, our instructors, and everything that they're doing to keep us running. There is no way that we would be able to run 5 classes if this range gets shut down. As we discussed, we have Boonesboro to fall back on. Anything else that we would actually do would involve travel. Now you're going to add an hour and a half, 2 hours to a training day. As the commissioner said, there's 4 other academies, and I certainly would love the luxury of making a basic training that's only taught 1 class at a time. That's not that hard to do. Try overlapping that 5 times when you don't. All you have is 1 driving range, 1 gym, and 1 firearms that we knew that's actually close to be able to do. Again, I've got some very smart people working for us that can figure these things out, thankfully. But it's a tremendous challenge, and any shutdown would cause a huge disorder with police right now. Recruitment and retention of law enforcement, not only in Kentucky but nationally right now, is tough. If chiefs or sheriffs have to wait long for somebody to get into basic training, they risk losing those recruits to other states that can get them in faster. So, as Mr. Wallace explained, having this multi-purpose type training facility would allow us to add more people to a class and to help us along with that type of training. I also have to consider overtime. I have to develop our training so that it's 40 hours in a week. Many of our constituents are 8 or 10 or less man police departments who have no budget for overtime. The other academies we're talking about, they control their own overtime of their own people. We don't train people that we employ. We train people employed by cities and counties across the Commonwealth. So I have to work, or I will start getting complaints that, Frank, we've got too much overtime coming out. So I have to try to keep training at 40 hours every week to be able to match that 800 hours and overlap that 5 times over. So any disruption in that process is, I hate to use the word catastrophic, but it is. If this range were to go down, I'm not sure how many classes I could actually run, 2, maybe 3, and that's about it. With and then again, if you had another flood situation, what were we down, Mr. Wallace? 2 months or 2 months, and they did a great job cleaning that up. But I would suggest to you that the unfiltered water of the Kentucky River is not exactly, I've got a safety background as well, is not exactly safe. Several years back on another flood, we put recruits out there and laid them down prone, and they got ringworm. So there is a lot of stuff that we have to consider with that range. It's got its challenges, EPA and lead, and the river's right there, and you see where I'm going. It's very costly. It has no running water to it. There's no bathroom facility, so it is not an answer long term for us to use that as a permanent facility. Period. We'd have to invest a tremendous amount of money to do that. I think that's
Well, so that's, I think the meat of the argument here that I'm sure that you all are very interested in, or what are we asking for and what is it going to cost? There are companies that specialize in building ranges, and I'm not necessarily saying we're going to use a template, but we certainly have plenty of templates for us to be able to get a good idea about cost and what a modern range and a forward-thinking range would look like. We're looking at least 30-lane firing range with 50 shooting yards with a 10-yard staging area behind it. We're looking for the ability to have vehicles on the range, as Mr. Wallace described, which would require bay doors. We're looking at classroom space, office space, an observation or a scoring area to be able to observe the training, weapons cleaning and maintenance area, storage room, and locker rooms. And I'll defer to Mr. Rader to speak kind of how we came up with the number that we had proposed last session with what this cost would look like. Mr. Rader.
Thank you, Commissioner. The cost, of course, trying to hit a actual cost of any building estimating is kind of tough to do, and obviously we do not have those resources in house to be able to do that. So we worked again with EOP, architectural firm, who reached out to a company that specializes in building ranges, and to develop the budget of $23 million, and that was the number that was requested this past session. And during that same conversation that I had with EOP yesterday, I was cautioned that, of course, building costs have skyrocketed, that perhaps could not, may not be enough when this, if this building's approved and when we break ground. However, building costs, as I understand, have started coming down slightly. I have a couple of friends that's building a house right now, and they've seen that in lumber cost, which would, of course, I guess, expand into other building costs as well. So that estimate is not an in-house estimate. I wanted to point that out, that these are from what we call experts to develop those numbers. The funding, as far as how we would fund the building, or how it would be proposed to fund the building or requested, would be through selling general fund bonds, if that would be approved, for the bond rating, to be able to obtain, I guess, a lower interest rate, if you will. And then, of course, paying for the debt service over the course of how many ever years the bond is set up for, through the CLEF fund, through the fund that funds our Department of Course Law Enforcement training in the Commonwealth, to be able to pay those payments. And I will point out that our agency is currently debt-free. We obtained that from Funderburk's been paid off for some time, but some of our other facilities is now paid off as well. And We no longer have a debt service payment currently at this time, and just also wanted to point that out. And of course, we could answer any other questions as far as that goes, and go into more detail if you need. But that's how it would be proposed to fund this facility.
And one other important piece of the puzzle is where to put it. Dr. McFadden with EKU has been a wonderful partner. I think there's a great future for DOCJT and EKU moving forward. We've got a lot of interesting ideas that we're looking at how we can grow together. But Dr. McFadden has been very gracious with helping us find a proposed location. And right now, the primary location we're looking at is right immediately adjacent to our campus. It butts right up against some of the current training facilities, literally within probably 100 yards of this firearms range. So we've got all the big pieces of the puzzle. We've got them all kind of prepared and ready, just basically to get the approval to kind of take off and move with it. We all know how long it takes state government projects to move through their course to get started, and we are on borrowed time. If we wait for this current range to fail, it is too late at that point. If we were to approve everything right here today, we would not have a functional building, I wouldn't imagine, within at least a year or two at best. So we're trying to ring the bell now so that we will be prepared for when that time comes. I just again want to stress that borrowed time notion, and that the lessons we've learned from what it was like to be shut down for just 3 months was pretty bad. It put quite a bit of stress on Kentucky's law enforcement. And I'd like to end with saying I've been so humbled by the just again, like Dr. Kubala said, our amazing staff that has been able to help us push through and pretty much accomplish whatever task is put in front of us. And moving forward, I really want to also express a lot of gratitude and humility to all the stakeholders involved. We've got the support of everybody from the Association Chiefs of Police, the Kentucky Sheriff's Association, the FOP, Kentucky Center for School Safety, and KLEC. Our stakeholders across the state, they recognize the significance of this, and they are very adamant in their support. So I'm grateful for them. I'm grateful for this time to speak to you all, and we will stand to answer any questions you may have.
Gentlemen, thank you for the presentation. A couple questions that I have. So, in consideration of the debt service, and I know it's you can't really anticipate what that debt service would be, but the idea is just basically the impact to DLCJT's budget would be nominal because you have expired previous debt service. So that funding could be used for the new debt service to cover the range, correct?
Yes, sir. When I started in this position in 2009, our net debt service was approximately $3.1 million for all the facilities that we occupy at this time. When Funderburk and this facility and some of the other facilities were paid off, that was took it down about $1 million. So $2.1 million we paid for quite some time, and our last debt service payment was around $488,000 for the last year of those bonds. So yes, sir.
And my other question, and I know there's no substitute for live firearms training because that is the experience that the officers are going to face. But I know the technology since I retired has changed from the old FATS machines. How much of a role does virtual technology and virtual experiences play in training today, especially related to firearms? Is that a significant part of the training now?
Yes, sir, it is. And Mr. Kabbalah actually sent me and two other instructors down 10 years ago, I think it was, to FLETC. They had a grant to study just that. They put in a lot of virtual ranges, and we went down and we installed one ourselves. And it supplements firearms training, but it can't replace it. And my analogy to that is, would you want to fly on an airplane with a pilot that was only trained on a simulator? They got a lot better flight simulators than they do shooting simulators. So we actively use that and have been for about the last 8 years to supplement that, and it does reduce the cost, but it can't completely replace that cost. No, sir.
Okay. So obviously, the need is there. You all are running more officers through than ever before. It is an element of time related. There are elements of time related to this with the downtime. So there is a significant need, and obviously, as we try to get officers on the streets, the more we can get through, the better. And everyone's aware of the severe shortages we have and the difficulties recruiting in today's environment, from what I'm understanding, are substantial. So I understand where you all are coming from with this. With the cost, have you gotten any idea in relation? And I know it's going to fluctuate from today, where the price of materials is so high. But did the architects give you any idea of what percentage to add from where the original estimate was?
Yes, sir. In that same conversation yesterday, I asked that same question to try to get an idea of the increased building cost, and basically the number that they came up, and whenever I state this number, this would include an increase in not only construction costs, but with increased construction costs come other costs. The total he gave me yesterday that we could potentially see as an increase with the July 22 break ground date, just as throwing that out there, was around $28,535,900. And that is a substantial increase, and I was blown away yesterday. Now, I also know that that's likely a conservative answer. I mean, erring on a side of caution, that's a hard number to hit right now. And trying to pin him down, that's probably not the best word, but trying to get a number yesterday, it took about 5 minutes to get there, just from different aspects and the rising. But however, one of the last statements he made, that cost they are seeing right now coming back down. But he also told us to consider that we need to consider labor shortage. That really, construction right now is still going on. That some of these skilled laborers, it's hard to find also. So we spent quite a bit of time talking about that yesterday. I hope that number is elevated, but that is the number that I was able to obtain yesterday.
If you all had any input from the insurance carrier for your facilities, I from what I've seen, I guess I'm a little surprised the building hasn't been condemned.
When we had that structural assessment and I read that statement, that was the first thought that ran through my mind. And we double checked, spent, I don't know how much time on the phone, that, look, we want the building to be safe. Are you sure? By shoring up this truss that we're safe in doing so. We did not get that truss or the steel beam that we put in for to support the main one that's failing. That was not in the video, but we did put that in based upon the structural engineer's recommendations. And and I failed to mention, we're starting a schedule of assessing this every year. And we actually discussed, should we go every 6 months, because of the deterioration from March of 2019 to September of 2020, to a point that we had a trust that, look, you better shore this up. We're gonna be doing that assessment again in September. So about 3 more months. That conversation was had, I think, last week or early this week, that we go ahead and gear up for that, because if that's our first and foremost concern, and getting that assurance from, it's not us looking at it, of course, and saying that'll be all right. That's working with the structural engineers to tell us, hey, is this safe?
Are there any questions from any members? Representative Co-Chair Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And first of all, my compliments on your being a debt-free agency. That's pretty significant. Have you all done an assessment of the conditions of your other buildings, and do you all have a separate line item for maintenance and repairs of those?
Yes, sir, we have. And one of the first buildings was the Funderburk building that, with my limited background, I knew we had an issue when water poured in the roof, when it rained. And we started assessing with that building first. And let me first of all say very thankful for that line item. And I can assure you we use that well. We put a lot of time and effort into studying we have a great facility staff that works around the clock of making sure our buildings are functional. Even the mechanical rooms, I just like mechanical rooms for one thing, but I walk through them from time to time. Our mechanical rooms, we sweep our mechanical rooms. We even clean in there. So we've worked since 2017 to assess all of our facilities, and I can tell you that we're in great shape. We very much appreciate that line item and that maintenance pool. We are working to address a number of projects right now. Between we have some leaks in the dormitory. We have some windows. We actually have some rooms that we've had to shut down because of water coming in the windows, and of course working with architectural firms to, why is it leaking, and let's fix it. The roof and of course the Thompson Hall, the dormitory, but in our Swinneman building, one of the most recent rains, water starts coming in there, of course, and we're assessing that roof. We're going to put a new roof on one of our buildings, the Stone building, which is where our current shoot house is, and some classrooms and some offices. Those shingles pretty much just crumble in your hand. We bought basically these canopies that we use at picnics and things, and we put that inside over the camera system because water was coming down on it. We now have a bladder, if you will, to catch that and redirect that water, but that project's going to go on the street. So we have assessed every single facility that we occupy and are continuing to do that on a pretty much daily basis. And we very much appreciate that support in that line item and are very thankful for that. So we are working hard on making sure that all of our facilities receive the best attention that they can.
Looking down the road, what is the next major project that you all have you looked at far in the future? What is the greatest need of a capital expenditure nature?
Really, I mean, the range, putting the range aside, but there are a lot of things that, some limitations, again, maximizing the training time. If you have 40 hours in a week, how do you maximize that? Well, one of the other things that takes away from time is eating, cafeteria. We have a small cafeteria that we're grateful to have access to from EKU in the Stratton building, which is right next door. But otherwise, usually for dinner and other meals, the recruits have to get in their cars and drive. It would be great for us to be able to have a cafeteria to be able to, plus we'd be able to make sure we offer good meals, nutritious meals to keep them nutritiously on track to match the training we're doing. But the cafeteria would be a big one. Another, just having some additional multi-purpose training areas, which is the range would be able to address. But really, the crux of where policing comes down to is decision-making under stress. And any time that there's been law enforcement in the news, it's always around a decision that was made under stress. And how do you best train for that? Well, you mimic that as best you can. And I'm really excited about us moving forward towards more and more scenario-based training. But to do those scenario-based training, to practice this making decisions under stress in a controlled environment so that you can do so successfully out in the real world, requires, we've got the strip mall center. I don't know if that was there when you were there, but the strip mall on the driving track is the best we have to kind of simulate a restaurant, simulate a bar, simulate a home. We also, again, our amazing staff has utilized a lot of our existing space as best they can. We've got a great, a modular training area in our Stone building that has walls that can move. But, again, they've made the most with what we have. We're very good at that. I cannot say enough about the creativity of our staff and the ingenuity of our staff, but we really have made the most. And and I would invite all of you all to come see, for you, Senator, see how it's changed since you were there last, but to come see what we do and to see how we have truly made the most of what we have. But to answer your question, I'd say cafeteria and additional like multi-purpose type training buildings would be great.
Very good. I started to say you all might want to put in an assisted living facility because you may need some to come back, and if the shortage continues. And Senator Schickel, are you up for that, sir? I think he passed out when I said that. I don't think he wanted any part of it.
Our rooms are pretty comfortable. I think I might be surprised.
Do any of our members remotely have any questions? If not, I want to change gears for just a second. Representative Fleming is here. He's not a member of this committee, but he came to me with a couple questions that he wanted to ask of this panel, and I think they are very pertinent. They're not firearms related, but it is related to DOCJT. So, Representative Fleming, please proceed, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity and your accommodation to help out in terms of getting some clarification on the training program. The chairman and I worked together a couple of years ago to pass House Bill 68, basically to help support law enforcement officers that go through traumatic events and give them support, the training material, so they can continue on the line of work of what they're doing, which is stellar, throughout the years. And even though we're in a situation throughout the country that's causing a lot of difficult times, I think having mental health services to law enforcement officers is critical and critically important. But I want to ask the commissioner and the staff on some things that I think you might be aware of what's going on. The intent of this bill was to set up a program that will give the necessary skills and tools for them, for the law enforcement officers to deal with the situations they come across. And I just want to know, can you explain what I understand might be a reorganization of the department in terms of dissolving the branch?
Absolutely. I'm very happy that you asked in this setting. That's something in the beginning of the meeting, I'd come up to you. That's what I was wanting to discuss with you. So one of the tasks that I had, and one of the priorities and prerogatives of a new commissioner, is to look at the organization and look at the department and how it's organized, and to make a determination and a call on whether or not the organization is being run as efficiently and effectively as possible. And before I go there, let me say that anyone who has known me as a police officer has known one of the major issues, one of the major concerns that I've had for many years is officer wellness and resiliency and mental health. That is something that I was very active with in the FOP prior to becoming commissioner, and it is certainly, absolutely our priority. And I thank you, sir, and for the staff at DOCJT that really did the heavy lifting to really kind of bring what we now have as Kentucky PCIS, to bring that into existence. It is an amazing program that functions very well. I was excited as commissioner to come on board to an agency to be in a position to support that. And under my administration, we have actively supported the program to the point where we have now expanded the program. We're going to, for the first time, be offering an off-campus PCIS session in Bowling Green later this year. DOCJT, prior to my arrival, had hired a mental health professional, which was new for DOCJT. And I recognized this mental health professional, her strengths and knowledge, and she was within a branch. And what I decided to do was to elevate that position, and she now actually reports directly to Dr. Kubala as training director, with my hopes that she would have influence on all of our training, basic and in service, because I feel like the concepts of mental health and resiliency, while they are amazing as individual sessions and classes, that there are concepts that we really need to be working towards integrating into all of our training. Just as we practice physical actions and motions with, defensive tactics and shooting and everything else, we need to be integrating into our regular everyday training these concepts, because again, the mental health and the stress of this job is unique and is significant. What happened for the reorganization was simply there was a branch that I felt, for anyone who's listening who doesn't know exactly how state government is structured, but within a division you have branches, within the branches you have sections, and within the sections you have the staff that do the most of the work. I had a branch that had a section with no supervisor and other sections with no people. For me, in my opinion, I felt that it was not an efficient use of our agency resources, and PCIS, that functions very well, was the core of that branch. I moved that section into a different branch. That section continues to function well, will continue to be fully supported. We have advanced into looking forward. We're looking into expanding some of the responsibilities of this section into peer support training. We're working closely with KLEC. We've just started to develop new certifications for officer mental health and wellness. We've got some budding, I've developed some relationships with some doctors, both in the field of the College of Social Work and other places within the University of Kentucky and some other places across the state, where we are looking into how can we better and more effectively expand this awareness, and how do we help officers in need across the state. So we are very active in our support for that. Anytime, if anybody's ever been involved in a reorganization, it is inherent that there will be some level of stress involved in that. Change for anybody, I've been on the bottom rungs of the various organizations I've worked in for most of my working life. And whenever there are decisions made at the top that involve some change, there's some stress and anxiety involved. And I understand and respect that. And perhaps maybe I had failed about trying to discuss about how those changes would and wouldn't impact folks. But that staff has not changed at all, other than our mental health professional, again, being moved up the chain into reporting directly to the training director. But the staff is fully supported. They will continue. We're expanding. And as we develop new concepts and as ideas start to come to life, if we need to develop new sections, and if we have enough sections where I feel comfortable and efficient that we create a new branch, I'd be more than happy to do so. I just felt like to be able to run, I'm somewhat a believer smaller government's more efficient. We had 5 branches. I slimmed that down to 3 branches. And it allows us for much more hands-on management, and for us to better be able to use those resources. For all of state government, I feel like DOCJT is a fairly small organization. We're less than 200 staff. And I just feel like, again, this reorganization will just kind of help streamline us and help us move forward.
I appreciate the explanation. Going that, I've been receiving phone calls and comments from quite a few people. And to be honest with you, Commissioner, it's a little different what I'm hearing from what you're telling me. I know running companies I've gone through and reorganized, resurrected company on a couple of occasions, and I understand the dynamics go on because there's people don't like change and fear and uncertainty. I get all that stuff. But when you hear that training material is not available anymore, that they're being redirected to an EAP program, they're not. Feel like they're being truly supported in terms of quite a few different programs that they thought they were going to be offered. It's not going to be there anymore. That's what I'm hearing. I
would love any details you have, because I am not aware of any training that we have stopped. Any training, our training has been expanding. But I would love any details you have. I would love to talk to you about that, because I have become aware over the past few days, resulting from some Facebook posts. I'm not on Facebook. I'm not a social media person anymore, but that there's a lot of misinformation. And I would love for you to even come visit us and speak directly with folks. But just simply administratively moving a group of folks who are retaining all of their responsibilities and all of their the whole part of their function has not changed. It just was administratively moved from one branch to another. But there has not been any cessation of any programs, any stopping of any training. There's no training materials that have been restricted or anything like that.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate the opportunity to ask the questions. Commissioner, I think it'd be fruitful for us to get together in about another 2 weeks. If you could call me up.
I would love to.
And sit down and talk about these issues so I can dissolve and try to, I mean, our responsibility is make sure that our employees, particularly law enforcement officers, are supported. And this is one particular avenue that we've got to be there to support y'all, among other things. So if I can dispel or try to go through, our job is oversight and support, and so that's where I'm coming from to doing that. So I would encourage you to give me a call in a couple weeks so we can sit down and talk about and either confirm or deny some of these things.
Absolutely.
I'm hearing.
And let me also thank you for this oversight and this concern. This is very, very important, and it is very new to law enforcement in general across the country. This whole budding awareness of the significance of mental health and wellness is fairly new. There's a lot of new territory that we're looking into, and again, I'm really excited about some of the relationships that we're building with some experts in the field, both in psychology and workplace stress. But I would love to talk to you about the direction that I'm looking to go and get your ideas about what other things we may be able to do.
Good. And Mr. Chairman, it's obviously your prerogative, and I'm just a guest at your committee, but I would like to hear either in this format or another format to have them come back, and maybe it's October, November, to get an update on what's going on, because you said about expanding and so forth. So
correct.
I'm going to hold your feet to the fire and make sure
Absolutely.
those things happen. Okay.
I look forward to it.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And I have to agree, that is just a crucial element in today's world. And training has always been important. There is no time in our history, I think, that it's been more important than it is at this point, because our officers are facing situations that they have never faced before. And with every week comes a new challenge that they face out on the streets. But there is a lot of support within this legislature on both sides of the aisle for law enforcement, and that's going to remain. And any efforts to harm our law enforcement community will be met with stern resistance from this legislature. I can assure you of that. But gentlemen, thank you for being here today, and hopefully we can get this process started. I have to agree with you. It is the new range and the new facility is badly needed. I know that DOCJT is a nationally accredited academy, and at one time I think we were the only nationally accredited academy. So we have a nationwide reputation as being one of the very best in the country, and I'm very proud of the academy that we do have at DOCJT, KSP, and the other facilities throughout the state. Someday I'd like to have the conversation about perhaps combining DOCJT and KSP academies, but that's a conversation for a different day. I see benefits to that. I see some economic, fiscal benefits to that, but I know there are other issues that must also be considered, but at some point, hopefully we can have that conversation. Appreciate you all. It's good to see you, Commissioner Frank, and gentlemen, thank you all so much, and hope to hear from you again when the session begins.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, we're going to move on to the second and final item on the agenda. We'll be hearing about the Litem Program. I think we have Secretary Johnson here.
Okay, let me get my camera on and turn my microphone on.
Good morning, ma'am. How are you?
I'm well, Mr. Chairman. How are you this morning?
I'm good. Who do you have that will be with you today?
I have Peggy Wilhite, and she is with my Office of Policy and Audit. And of course, I think as I mentioned last time I appeared before you, our auditor, Jerry Hopman, is now with Legislative Research Commission, and she was with the office at the time that the audit was conducted, so she can answer questions that may be specific to the audit if you have any specific after my testimony. And I also have Tina Howard, who is the Executive Director of our Office of Budget and Fiscal Management. And she oversees the specific administrative payment process for the Guardian Ad Litem payments that finance cabinet is in charge of. And I apologize. I have screens over here and I have screens over here and I have my camera here. So that's why I'm looking over to the left to see you. So.
Okay. Thank you, ma'am. And please proceed with your presentation.
Okay, I'm going to try to share my screen. Apologize as I try to be techie this morning. Can you all see my screen, my PowerPoint?
No.
Not yet. No?
No, it's not up yet.
Okay. That's what I feared. Okay. Oh, there. Oh, no.
There it is.
There it is.
Yes.
I think that's the wrong one. Let me stop sharing this one. Again, we're being techie this morning. Let's try this. Now is it up there? Yes. It's got a green line around it. Is it there?
Yes, that's it.
Yes. Okay. All right. I'm going to get started now. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I am Holly Johnson, Secretary of the Finance Cabinet. Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee today to talk to you about the Finance and Administration Cabinet's process improvements to guardian ad litem payments. These payments are processed within the Cabinet's Office of Budget and Financial Management. But that is not all that OBFM does. As you can see, this office supports multiple entities within the Finance Cabinet, as well as other general government units attached to the Cabinet for administrative support. The responsibilities of the Budget and Fiscal Management Office are broad as well. The main objective is to oversee day-to-day financial operations, fulfill programmatic responsibilities, financially advise and provide customer service to our supported agencies. In doing so, this slide provides a list of general tasks and responsibility, of which GAL payment administration is just one of many. I'd like to share with you today some enterprise-wide changes we have implemented in the Finance Administration Cabinet that are significantly improving the processing of payments to guardian ad litem attorneys. Oh, God, okay, I got too far ahead over there. I'm so sorry. Okay. Because the 2019 GAL audit predates my appointment as Cabinet Secretary, I cannot speak in detail about what measures might have been taken to address any of the audit findings before my arrival on December 11th, 2019. However, I can confirm that the form GALs used to submit the request for payment was updated by the previous administration as a result of the findings included in the audit. I can also confirm that at the time of my appointment, there still existed the practice of applying blanket approvals to all GAL payments. Blanket approvals did not provide the review of each submission necessary to ensure the integrity of the payments. We quickly discontinued that practice and now review each individual GAL form, and we have managed to conduct this more detailed review while simultaneously reducing the GAL payment backlog. In early 2020, the Cabinet began incorporating extensive process improvements, including tighter controls and enhanced efficiencies into our payment processes. These broad process improvements, while not specifically in response to the 2019 audit or limited only to GAL payments, have significantly cut down on the duplicate or delayed payments to guardian ad litems identified in the audit. As you may know, the staff in the Cabinet's Office and Budget Fiscal Management administer the appropriations not otherwise classified budget, which includes $11.2 million for guardian ad litem services in fiscal year 2021 and $11.1 million in fiscal year 2022. The fee paid to GALs for their services is established by the court, and the payments are processed by the staff in our Division of Fiscal Management. As you can imagine, there is a very high volume for requests for payments to court-appointed GALs handled by our staff, and the process for completing, approving, and filing is a very tedious one. In fact, the Division of Fiscal Management currently has one employee whose workday is solely dedicated to processing these GAL payment requests, which average around 400 to 500 per week. At one time, the processing of GAL payments was behind schedule by as much as 3 months, which is wholly unacceptable and something our staff has worked hard to remedy. There we go. I am pleased to share with you today that backlog has been reduced from 3 months to 2 weeks. This reduction in the long-standing backlog of GAL payments has been primarily accomplished by working closely with the county clerks and attorneys to implement an updated electronic process for submitting forms as well as other process enhancement. Our fiscal staff now process GAL requests Monday through Wednesday of each week, so these payments are ready to be issued within the same week. And while we hope to further lessen any processing delays with the ultimate goal of issuing payments within the same week received, this shortened turnaround time is a tremendous improvement, particularly considering it has been implemented within the first 6 months of this calendar year. Some additional improvements to the payment processes were accomplished by adding new tracking mechanisms with detailed accounting codes to correlate to the KRS paid against in EMARS to capture details including court type, type of representation, attorney role, and county distinction. Tracking these new fields will also allow us the ability to run detailed reports of payments that can be sorted by attorney, county, as well as type of case. Previously, this was done manually. The Cabinet's payment approval process also includes thorough auditing and approvals to further reduce the potential for duplicate or erroneous payments. We have also developed written procedures for the processing of GAL payments, which previously did not exist. And most recently, we have communicated with AOC and will provide a video on-demand presentation for judges and attorneys regarding submitting payment, becoming a vendor in the system, filling out the FIN-GAL-1 form, and the processes associated with multiple parts of GAL and CAC regarding payment submission to alleviate forms being returned for insufficient or incorrect information and allowing for more timely payment. During my tenure as secretary, I have directed my staff to identify any opportunities they can find to improve our processes and provide better service to our citizens, our contractors, and other government agencies, as well as those who serve as guardian ad litems. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you today, and I hope this information that I have shared with you has been helpful. As I introduced earlier, I have Peggy Wilhite with us, and I also have Tina Howard. And if you have specific questions or very detailed questions, they can assist me in answering those for you today. So let me figure out how to take the share off. How do I stop sharing? There we go. All right. I think that's it.
Okay, do we have any questions? Any of those folks remote have any questions? Okay, I'm going to ask that the remainder of the panel for this topic please come up. Good morning, and thank you all for being here. Please introduce yourselves for the record, and you have the floor. Just push the button down. Yeah, there you go.
Marcus Vanover. I'm a family court judge for Pulaski, Lincoln, and Rockcastle counties.
My name's Nathan Goins. I'm the family court liaison for the Administrative Office of the Courts.
I'm Angie Darcy, and I am the Government Affairs Liaison for the Administrative Office of the Courts.
Chairman, members of the committee, we want to thank you for inviting us to speak today. We wanted to provide you with an oversight of how the guardians ad litem are appointed and selected and trained under new rules that were recently administered through the Kentucky Supreme Court. Okay. We also wanted to provide a brief statutory overview of guardians ad litem in the process, and then discuss the improvements that will have been implemented through the new family court rules, and discuss with you any specifics related to the practical applications of those rules in a courtroom setting.
So I'm just going to give you a brief overview. I'm sure most of you, I know probably, or some of you actually practice family law in our court systems and probably are pretty familiar with our GAL process, but I just wanted to give you a brief overview for those that don't know how it kind of works. So we have GALs, and then we also have something called court-appointed attorneys. And they are different, but they are still governed by our same rules. So we have FCRPPs that govern the behavior and the conduct of GALs and court-appointed attorneys. Court-appointed attorneys really act in the interest of the client, whereas GALs act in the best interest of the client. You'll see GALs appointed in cases such as guardianship. You also see them appointed in cases such as DNA, dependency, neglect, and abuse, adoptions. They also are appointed to represent incarcerated people when they in civil actions at times. And then the minors for trusts and estates, you'll see a GAL appointed. Court-appointed attorneys are for indigent persons. They're appointed in criminal proceedings. This isn't going to apply to this presentation, but it's just a general overview. And also for juvenile respondents with public offense cases and status offense cases, they're also appointed court-appointed attorneys in those. Those are your public defenders that you'll see in those cases. And then indigent adults in child welfare cases are also for court-appointed attorneys. So the next slide talks about just the general actions that you'll see GAL and CAC appointments. But really here we're just going to talk about DNA cases, adoption cases, and termination of parental rights. And one of the reasons that we're going over those cases is those cases are actually what are encompassed in and what are required to have training by statute and also by the FCRPPs. So those are the only cases that we are going to talk about today, because statute-wise and FCRPP-wise, those are the only cases that are covered under our appointment and training process for GALs. The conduct certainly could pass over. If you're a GAL in a DNA case, then you can actually, you can take some of that training and apply it. But for the most part, that's where we're statutorily required to provide the training. So in 2019, there was a study that was done, or I guess an audit that was done in northern Kentucky for the GAL process. And after that audit came through, we at the AOC in the Kentucky Court of Justice did wide sweeping changes because it was important to address some of the inefficiencies and the inequities that we saw through that audit. So one of the things that we had instituted was the FCRPPs. So in the FCRPPs came out from, and most of the things that we adopted in the statewide standards and in the FCRPPs came from the ABA Center on Children and Law, the legal representation in child welfare proceedings and their essential practices and quality hallmarks. So that's where we got a lot of our guidelines for the FCRPPs. And that I'm going to talk about that briefly, and then I'm going to turn it over to Nathan, because Nathan is absolutely the expert on FCRPPs. I'm just here to introduce them. So the new statewide rules were adopted by Order 2021, and they were effective on 2/1/2020. Now, this is right before the pandemic hit, but we think that we did a pretty good job implementing them statewide, even with the pandemic. So the committee spent a great deal of time and effort reviewing best practices in other states' processes. This work resulted in 4 new rules and a statewide set of standards for all guardian ad litems and court-appointed attorneys in DNA, TPR, and adoption cases. So our first FCRPP is 35, and that's the standards for court-appointed counsel. Now, court-appointed counsel also covers GALs. So the new rules and standards are listed here and are included as a handout. We discussed some in more detail as we discussed changes in appointment and training. FCRPP is the standards for court-appointed counsel, which includes GALs. In addition to rules 35 through 38, court-appointed counsel shall follow the statewide standards as found in our Appendix D. A circuit or district from the statewide standards by way of local rule have to follow the FCRPPs and can have a deviation, but only if approved by the Chief Justice. They must also incorporate the ABA and or National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Judges best practice standards. So you'll see that FCRPP deals with the standards. 35, that's 35, sorry. FCRPP 36 deals with appointment and retention of GALs and CACs. FCRPP 37 is the required training for GALs and CACs. FCRPP 38 is duties regarding representation and repayment. In Appendix D, which is probably the most important one that we adopted, is the statewide standards of expected conduct for court-appointed counsel. So now we're going to discuss the appointment process of GALs in family court. I'm going to just note that it's important to point out that since all GALs are attorneys, the Office of Bar Counsel, acting as agency of the Supreme Court, is responsible for investigating complaints against lawyers practicing in Kentucky. The OBC also prosecutes charges of ethical misconduct issued by the Inquiry Commission. I think it's also important to note that we have revamped our FCRPPs so that the court can also address any misconduct or any problems with GALs. And we have actually had several instances where courts have either removed the GAL from appointment for not following the statewide standards, or they have issued sanctions against that GAL. And in some occasions, we've actually had judges report GALs to the Kentucky Bar Association because of these rules.
Thank you. So I'm going to be walking through appointments and training, and also some other initiatives that we have kind of been involved with for the last probably 2 years, I'd say. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, and
Okay.
we're going to try to wrap this up in 15 minutes, so please.
I can do that.
Okay, very
Yeah.
good. Thank you.
So the next part of it is fairly basic. I just want to say that, and this kind of builds on what Angie had said, part of these new rules were born from the audit. Some things about billing, issues maybe about disparate appointments, things like that, which we addressed in our probably the first two rules, and then also the rule about payments. But we also took this opportunity to address some concerns that we have heard it's just been years that we've heard it. I hope that it's, and I feel like it's a limited number of attorneys, but we have heard about GALs not contacting children when they represent them, or and things like that. And I think some of that might be a little bit of a misunderstanding about the system, but we did want to take this opportunity, since we were looking at GAL, like the process of it, we also wanted to look at the substantive, practice of it and try to improve that. And that's where those statewide standards go from. So appointment, if you look through, I'll go quickly through this. It's in the PowerPoint, so you have it, but these are the appointment this is the appointment statute for DNA cases. I'm sure you all know all this already, but when it comes to DNA, we mean dependency, neglect, abuse cases, and not like paternity tests. But in this case, we have a GAL has to be appointed in a DNA proceeding. In a TPR case, and KRS 625041, that requires that a GAL be appointed in a voluntary termination of parental rights, and 625080 requires that attorney be appointed, or a GAL be appointed in a voluntary TPR. So basically, through the entire child welfare court process, a GAL has to be appointed. In Kentucky, that GAL has to be an attorney. Some states they don't have to be. In Kentucky, they do have to be. Before we started with the rules, there's also appointments and adoptions. I'm not going to get into it because it's a little bit probably more nuanced than we have time for today, but there are GALs appointed in adoptions as well. Let's see, typically they are not paid for by finance, or by the state. They're paid for by the petitioner, but there are instances when they would be paid for the state, and that's included in that slide. If you have any questions, we'd be happy to answer that. So now getting into the rules, and most of the rules, like this is just kind of a summary of what's in there. Rule 36 is the appointment rule. It is basically what it does is it tries to open the list to any attorney who's eligible. So in order to be eligible in Kentucky now, you have to be an attorney of good standing in Kentucky, and you also have to have completed the AOC's initial training. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. But these rules are intended to open up the roster to anybody that's available. They're also intended to ensure that appointment or like actual appointment to individual cases are fair. They just go by a rotating list as opposed to picking one for every other case or every case. Those were suggestions from the audit, so we took care of that. But we also wanted to reserve power to still have judges have the power to control the quality of practice in their courtroom. So in order to do that, the court system, like AOC, we administer, the court. We work with judges, and judges, of course, they have power over their court. But the Bar Association has more power over direct attorneys than we do. Judges have had a lot more discretion before these rules, but these rules kind of required these lists to be open. So what we wanted to make sure of was that didn't open list to attorneys who didn't have their heart in this practice, or they were challenged by this practice. So the rules allow judges to remove a GAL or a parent attorney if that parent or if that attorney is not keeping up with the standards that we established, that's a pretty significant sanction. You don't see that very often, a sanction specifically allowing a judge to remove an attorney. And let's see, and Judge Vanover, feel free to step in if you have any things. I'm going really fast, but so the next bit of the appointment rules, it talks about indigency. The audit made a point of saying that it appeared that some judges may not have completed the indigency inquiry before appointing attorneys. Now that happens a lot. In GAL, you don't have to worry about indigency, but with parents in these cases, the judges, they have to balance, ensuring that these parties are eligible for an attorney, but they also have to balance that against, due process rights, because sometimes the party's not there, the parent's not there to say that they're indigent. So anyway, we try to balance that by giving a leeway of 5 days if the party is not there, but we are requiring indigency affidavit. And I don't see a clock on anything around me, so how much time do I have? 10 minutes? All right, thank you, I appreciate that. So we also have provisions in the appointment rules to make sure that the attorney list doesn't stay stagnant. We want courts to review those at least every 4 years. A lot of courts are doing it more often than that, but the rules have 4 years. And I say we, it's not we. It's really the Supreme Court that created these rules. So forgive me if I say we on that. But also when I talked about appointing attorneys sequentially or in a fair way as opposed to picking and choosing attorneys, that is included in FCRPP 36, I believe 7. Okay, one thing that you all, in the request to come here, it said something about shortcomings in our system right now, and this is probably the biggest shortcoming that we have. One of the biggest, I'm sorry, and that is the fee structure that we have for these cases. I practiced in these cases before I joined AOC, and I can tell you that if you do it the right way, it's easy to end up with 20, 30 hours on these cases and sometimes more. Unfortunately, the way our fee structure is set up, you're limited to $500 at the most on these cases. And then if you're in district court, it's actually half of that, which is anyway. There was a bill that sought to equalize that. We've asked that they feel like that it should be equal on those, since it's just a matter of a couple flights of stairs sometimes on which court you're in, whether you're in district or family. Anyway, so that's something to consider because it's very low compared to the time and also compared to some other states. And I think Judge Vanover had something to say about this as well.
The attorneys that practice in the district courts are doing the same level of work that they are doing in the family courts. They're required to put in the time. They're held to the same standards. They're treating the same type of cases. And frankly, their level of pay should be equal to what's going on in the circuit courts and the family courts. So we would definitely, and I think we've asked for this before, definitely ask to increase that to the $500 level across the board. However, I also wanted to point out that this level, the $500 itself, is low compared to surrounding states. A couple of years ago, Justice Lambert was attending a training in another state and indicated that Alabama, for example, pays up to $2,500 per case on this. And I know that seems like a lot, but compared to what we're receiving or what our attorneys are receiving, I just wanted to put that in contrast.
Thank you. So next, I want to talk about training. So another aspect in trying to increase the quality of legal representation is to try to, it starts a lot with training. So with the new rules coming in and the new standards, we took a look at the training that we currently have and sought to improve it. I've included the statute here for at least in our state statute requiring that attorneys in GAL attorneys have to have training that's kind of appropriate to the role, but they also have to have child development training, which, if you think about it, is really important because they're going to be dealing with child clients. So it's a different way to approach and build rapport. So having child development, just some of us have, it's been a while since we've been a kid. So it's kind of important to see how they're talking now and how to approach them so you can represent them the best way possible. In the new family court rules, we added that it was mandatory that they complete our training. We've been training or putting out a training for guardians at Litem for about a decade, maybe longer. And a lot of judges do mandate that they take our training, but not everybody. So we just decided, or in these rules, they decided to just make it mandatory. So you have to have completed our training before you can be appointed. Yeah, I'm not. Yeah. So, yes. And then Judge Vanover.
One of the things I wanted to point out in regard to this training is not only do attorneys to get on the list are required to participate in the 12-hour training, but to maintain their appointment on the list, they have to receive 4 hours every 2 years of additional training to get to remain on these lists and remain eligible for these appointments. And I want to point out this is one of the few instances where it's mandated that attorneys receive specific training to do a particular kind of work. All attorneys are required to have 12 and a half hours of continuing education, but this is one of the few instances where we require specific training in a specific area of law to maintain eligibility to take those type of cases.
Okay, so since we were mandating that all these attorneys had to take our training, we decided that we wanted to take a really close look at our training to see if it needs to be improved, if it could be more effective or efficient. So a training work group was put together with judges, attorneys, stakeholders to examine our current training and then to consider changes or improvements. These are our training tracks. I'm really proud of these. I won't go into all the details because I'm sure you all are familiar with a lot of these topics, but we really focused on reasonable efforts, which is a federal and state requirement, but is also kind of the cornerstone. Maybe that's not the right term, but it's like the overarching kind of oversight in a way that the court system does for in these child welfare cases. The agency has to make reasonable efforts to prevent removal and to reunify up to a certain point, and there are some exclusions, but overall, that's the goal, and the courts are kind of empowered to hold their feet to the fire, for lack of better words. So we began with kind of a rallying cry about reasonable efforts and a reminder of how important it is. The rest of them I won't go into, but we were really excited about including trauma, like from the previous discussion, so we wanted to make sure that was in there, and they did a great job on trauma and early childhood development, and then we have evidentiary and appellate issues that we've seen. We wanted to address those. Let's see. We had over 500 attendees at the trainings, which is it's mandatory, so I can't toot my horn too much about that. But we did have a lot of people attend, and we have had a very positive response from those who attended. We did have some suggestions for changes, which we are going to look into and improve for the next cycle. When you all have another chance, take a look at because I know we're out of time, take a look, if you don't mind, at the 2 attachments that we provided. One is the frequently asked questions for foster parents and relative caregivers. The other is Know Your Rights booklet on DNA cases. These booklets provide a wealth of information for especially people who are not familiar with the legal system. It tells them who they need to talk to if they're not getting not getting noticed, who they need to talk to if their attorney's not doing what they're supposed to do, if their judge is not doing what they're supposed to do, if the cabinet's not doing what they're supposed to do, how to navigate the clerk's office, things like that, which we get a lot of questions. And when I practice, I got a lot of questions about that. So it's nice to have, thinking of a practitioner, having something you can hand to the client that has a lot of information already in there with your contact information, hopefully. So we're really excited to see how that works out. Future projects, we're just looking at how our training worked. We have a follow-up survey that we're going to send out, and we're going to take that information and other input, and we're going to improve it and carry on, see if we can find out a way to measure outcomes on this. And that's all. Thank you all for your time.
Most of the attorneys that are GAL that apply for that, are they newer attorneys coming out of law school, or is there a pretty good balance? It depends throughout the state.
It depends. We a lot of them are newer attorneys because it's a way to help people, to help clients from the get-go. A lot of attorneys, especially if you're an associate, you might not be in court. I don't know. I was never at a big firm, so I don't know how it works. But you might not be in court for a while. But this way you can get right in there and help clients. But we also have many who have been doing it for years. They're family law practitioners. There's a significant overlap between family law and these cases. There can be a significant overlap between family law, of course, includes domestic violence, but domestic violence practice, these cases, and family law. So we have just a range of people, and then we have people who worked at, they might have been corporate counsel or legal counsel to an agency, and they're volunteering, this as kind of like a retirement kind of thing. They still want to help, but they don't want to. Yeah, so it's a wide variety. Sorry.
Very good, Representative Hatton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You may have said this, and I'm sorry if I missed it, but is there CLE credit for the guardian ad litem training, and how much?
Yes, there's 8 right now, credit or hours, but we're working on having a ethics hour. Also, it'd be kind of a separate thing, and we have other things that we've been working on through CIP. But for the training, 8 hours, yeah, and it's over 2 tracks, and you can do it on demand. But we try to schedule it at least once a month. So,
okay.
Yeah,
that sounds like a good incentive. I've done GAL work for over 20 years, but I would certainly take the training and be interested in it.
Yeah.
It's also free, so that's another definite bonus.
Yeah, and it's virtual this time. We had planned. I mean, we had 9 locations across the state, and then this hit. So I was really proud of the people in our office and legal, everybody who got together and adapted with that.
So is there a shortage of GALs throughout the state, or is it?
I wouldn't say that there's a shortage. It's just like anything else. Like in Northern Kentucky and Louisville and
more attorneys.
Yeah, Fayette, you have more available. In some counties, especially if you have a rural county with the $25 or $250 district court as opposed to a family court, it might be hard to get somebody to travel in from another county or two to do these.
So
cases.
obviously no financial incentive to do this. It's done out of the goodness of your heart, I guess.
Essentially, yeah.
Okay. What do we spend annually on average for GALs in the budget? Do you all know? Madam Secretary, do you know that? If you're still there. There she is. You're muted.
Yes, I had that in my presentation. If I can find it again.
I can answer. I took a note on that, if that's okay, Secretary. It was 11.2 million in fiscal year 21, and then 8.18 million. This is there was other numbers after that. 11.18 million in 2022. That's what's budgeted at least.
Okay, very good. Are there any other questions? There's no one left, but just three of us. Thank you all so much for being here. And it's, I've a lot I need to learn. I'm going to take the time to read all of this, and I appreciate you all being here, and I appreciate the services that our GALs provide. And I think it is very critical that our children be represented in court and their best interest be looked out for. That's a huge part of our system, but appreciate the information and hope to hear from you again some point in more detail in the future. But thank you so much for your work. Madam Secretary, thank you for being here and your staff, and we do appreciate all that you all do as well. And if there are no other issues before the committee, we will stand adjourned.